It's possible that Windows on ARM is about to be absolutely huge. However, we really want to see what the gaming performance looks like to see if there's any future there. And we finally have some performance claims. Now, these are first-party performance claims from Qualcomm about the gaming performance of their Snapdragon X Elite. So we need to be very careful about that. And we also have a lot of other information about their GPU that's on this thing, as well as how they plan to support that with software and driver updates, which are extremely critical for future performance. But before we dive too much into the details here, I think it's incredibly important that we talk about the fact that this is first-party performance claims, and that is a huge deal, as is kind of highlighted in AMD's recent Computex presentation, because AMD's first-party slides for their new 5900 XT and 5800 XT processors are incredibly misleading to the point of basically being outright lies. And this is a horrible look for AMD, although AMD is absolutely not the only tech company that will provide misleading performance results, but this is one of the most egregious examples we've seen recently and is a very bad look for AMD. So when you're looking at first-party performance slides, it's very important to remember that this kind of thing can happen. Now, this was brought to my attention from the Hardware Unboxed YouTube channel, who discussed this in the part 2 of their June Q&A series, where basically viewers kind of asked in about, hey, what do you think about this? AMD basically lying for their performance results here. So what do we mean about them basically lying? So the 5900 XT and the 5800 XT CPUs, well, they're technically new CPUs. They're really just kind of refreshes, slight reworkings of CPUs that are basically already out there. So we know what their performance should roughly be. And it shouldn't be beating a 13600KF. And the 5900 XT should not be beating a 13700K. Because again, these are slight clock speed differences and rebrandings of CPUs that are already out there. These are very similar to CPUs like the 5950X and the 5800X. That again, we already have performance data for. So here, Hardware Unboxed is calling attention to the fact that, wait, the 5800X, when compared to a 13600K, the 13600K is a newer generation product. It's faster in gaming. In their testing, on their 12-game average, it's about 28% faster. And if you look at the 13700K up against the 5950X, which again should be similar to the gaming performance that we're seeing from these kind of reworkings from AMD, the 13700K is 36% faster. Again, it's a newer generation product. When you're not talking about the 3D V-cache parts from the 5000 series, Intel's 13 series CPUs are much faster at gaming. So it would be utterly shocking if these kinds of performance claims were actually true. A non-3D V-cache 5000 series part on the AM4 platform outperforming a 13600KF or a 13700K, that seems utterly ridiculous. So how is AMD making these claims? Well, again, it's not technically an outright lie, although it might as well be. How are they making these claims? Well, when you look at the footnotes for how they ran the testing, they ran these tests using an RX 6600 GPU. Now, why does the GPU matter when you're making CPU performance claims? Well, let's look back to how Hardware Unboxed and basically any other reputable CPU testing is done. You do it on an extremely high-end GPU at a low resolution. Why do you do that? Well, when you're trying to measure how fast a game can go, the game's overall performance can be limited by different factors. Usually, you're either held back by the CPU or by the GPU. So if you're measuring the performance of the CPU and you want to see how fast can the CPU go if it's not held back by anything else in the system, then you need to use a high-end GPU and probably run at a lower rendering resolution to eliminate as much GPU limitation as you can in the testing. If you put in a GPU that is so slow that it can't reach the maximum performance of the CPU, so if you put in a GPU that could only reach, here, then all of these bar charts would just stop here. And all of these CPUs would give identical performance. Do you see what I'm saying here, right? So now a lot of people misunderstand this when you look at CPU reviews, and they're like, why? This is unrealistic. Nobody buying these CPUs would have a 4090 or play at 1080p. Yeah, but again, the whole point is to remove GPU bottlenecking from CPU performance data. Whereas, AMD knows this, right? They know that. So why would you use an entry level, like RX 6600, these things are going for under $200 right now. And these high-end gaming CPUs are absolutely going to be limited by an RX 6600 in many, many gaming situations. So why would you do that? Oh, well, I guess you would do it to intentionally make it look like your performance is similar or better to the competition. Now, it's incredibly unfortunate that AMD would do this because, first of all, you didn't have to give performance numbers at all. You could just highlight the fact that you are giving a, another CPU, generation reworking. I mean, not really new generation, but you're giving another reworking of CPU support to the AM4 platform, which is great. That's awesome. You can leave it at that. If you want to give performance results, give honest performance results. This is flat out lying to the audience. And another reason why I think this is especially bad is because this kind of CPU launch is probably not going to get a lot of review coverage. It's a slight reworking to old stuff. You can probably already figure out roughly how it will perform. And unless we hit a really slow news period, it's highly likely that big review outlets would just skip over this. I don't review CPUs, but Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, places like that, like I said, may eventually test something like this, but honestly, likely wouldn't. Although given AMD's claims here, I could see now maybe visiting this just specifically to call attention to the fact that these slides are lies. Because if AMD's own first-party performance claims are the only actual benchmark data out there because these CPUs might not have garnered actual media coverage beyond, hey, they exist, and not performance testing, then somebody actually looking to buy these who might Google search, 5800 XT, gaming performance, might pull up articles talking about these slides, look at that, notice that it's similar to a 13600 KF, might look at the price of a 13600 KF versus this, and think, wow, what a great deal. Right? So it's incredibly misleading, and I'm hopeful that maybe CPU reviewing outlets will actually take a closer look at these CPUs when they actually do launch. Maybe if they wouldn't have before, maybe specifically to highlight that this is inaccurate information. And man, AMD, it's just like, why are you doing this? This is beyond the pale of just cherry-picking games. That's the type of thing that you would normally see happen, is cherry-picking games that perform better on one platform versus the other, but not basically lying about the performance. This is pretty much lying about the performance. This is right up there with some of the scummiest first-party performance slides I've ever seen. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's return to this. So this is a first-party performance claim from Qualcomm. Now, there's not necessarily specific reason why this has to be complete outright lies, but as you can see, first-party performance claims need to be taken with heavy scrutiny and grains of salt and all of those things, But anyway, with that in mind, here's what we're seeing. So they're showing their Snapdragon X Elite up against Intel's Core Ultra 7 155H. Now, one thing to keep in mind there is the 155H is not a 185H, which I think would be the higher end platform from Intel. So they're not up against Intel's best. Another thing that's very notably absent here is an AMD APU, because AMD, like look at some of my testing. So in my testing recently of Intel's Core Ultra 9 185H, which should be higher end in gaming performance than their 155H, is up against a AMD APU from the 7840HS, which comes with a 780M, which is similar in gaming performance to their 880M, but AMD will soon be having a new generation of APUs, which could even surpass this performance. But when I did this, and this is in mini PC form factor rather than in laptop form factor, so I'm less concerned about like the wattage and things like that. So anyway, but this is mini PC testing. But notice that here in like Cyberpunk at 1080p low settings, AMD has a 32% lead in the averages. Which is pretty significant. If you kind of scroll through some of my other testing results here, Call of Duty Modern Warfare at 1080p basic settings, I see an 83% advantage for AMD. The point is that there's some pretty big gaming performance leads here. If I jump into 1080p medium results in Cyberpunk, 29% lead for AMD. So the point is that one thing I'm noticing here is that AMD is conspicuously missing from these tests, where it would probably, my guess would be, look a lot less favorable for the Snapdragon X Elite up against AMD competition. However, we do have these results. So again, you see that the Snapdragon is similar but slightly behind the 155H from Intel in Cyberpunk. Now, what game settings? I don't know. It says that they're measured at 1080p resolution, and it says that the Qualcomm CPU was on a reference design laptop, and the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H was tested using an Acer Swift Go 14 laptop. But it doesn't, it says that this is average frame rates at 1080p resolution, but we don't have information other than that. What exact graphic settings are being used or what part of the game was being tested, because that's another way that you can kind of skew first-party results is by, depending on what part of the game you test, sometimes different architectures perform better in that specific circumstance than others. So there's a lot of possibilities here. But anyway, with all of that aside, if you do take this at face value, it does look like the Snapdragon X Elite could be, somewhat competitive, at least with Intel's APUs on their on this generation. But again, AMD and Intel should be soon releasing an updated generation to their integrated graphics. So we'll see what comes of that. And now some of the gaming performance here looks fairly reasonable. Again, it looks like you can play Cyberpunk at about 30 FPS. Witcher is hitting, Witcher 3 hitting 60 FPS, but again, at what part of the game? F122, Rocket League's doing pretty well. But again, what parts of the game? Is this a demanding area in the game? There's all sorts of questions we could have here about this. Also, this is average FPS. Another place you can see issues, especially if driver support isn't great, is in 1% lows, which is like how stuttery is this going to be? Now, if we look at more of this presentation, though, we do get some interesting information about the overall architecture here. Now, speaking of their software support, this is actually pretty cool. So they are talking about graphics driver updates. So they're talking about performance improvements, bug fixes, and new features. They're talking about a monthly release schedule. So I think drivers will be huge. We've seen this with Intel trying to get better into the graphics performance, and drivers have been everything. So they're promising monthly driver update release schedule, so that they're at least for now committing to that pretty seriously. They're also showing off their Adreno GPU control panel, because it's the Adreno X1 GPU in this platform that we're taking a look at here. That's the GPU within the overall chip here. You can see the Adreno GPU here, along with their Hexagon NPU. You can see the Qualcomm Orion CPU. You can see the memory. Anyway, so you get a cool shot of how all of this works. But the point is, the Adreno GPU will also get their Adreno control panel, which is a companion application to the Adreno GPU for Windows on Snapdragon. This will allow you to keep the drivers up to date, and it also looks like it will have automatic game setting optimizations. It'll be interesting to see which games are supported on that. This is something that Nvidia does. They offer optimized game settings through their driver software. And also software-tuned GPU performance ensures optimal user experience. So again, it looks like they're really trying to come out with a lot of the kind of features you would expect on Windows from big players like AMD and Nvidia as when it comes to a driver software and control panel and things like that. So that's kind of cool. Again, they go into pretty good depth on what kinds of performance numbers they claim for the Adreno X1 GPU, talking about 4.6 teraflops of FP32 performance and up to 72 gigapixels a second fill rate. Again, how does it actually perform in games? I don't think these always tell you, everything you'd want to know about that. They are talking about for Windows PCs, they will have DX 12.1 support up to shader model 6.7, as well as DirectML with accelerated meta commands, DX 11 support, Vulkan 1.3, OpenCL 3.0, and this is all with native driver support. So drivers will be a huge deal, again, like we've seen with Intel trying to break into this. We'll have to see how drivers work out here. Now, I'm not sure. We're seeing DX11 and DX12. What about older games? What if you're trying to run a DX9 game or something like that? We'll have to see how they work with that. They talk a lot more about their SIMD shader process, and honestly, this stuff's getting a little beyond stuff that I think I'm going to read out the whole slide. But here's the slide, and I will link all my sources in the video description. Let's see. They also talked about, again, more technology behind their rendering process. However, once again, I think reading through the details of this, probably a little bit beyond what's useful for my main audience on the channel. They do talk about the high bandwidth of their local GPU memory. And then, how all of this works. But again, I think a lot of this being a bit beyond where makes sense for us to spend a huge amount of time with on this video. However, they do release this pretty interesting graph, but once again, first-party graphs. What do we make of it, right? So they're saying up to. Now, up to is another marketing word you really need to be careful of, because up to means that this happens at least in one situation they could measure. Maybe it's not at all typical, but hey, up to 67% faster GPU performance versus competition at the same power level. So I'm not quite sure what they mean by idle normalized platform power. SoC plus DRAM plus PCL. Idle normalized. Again, I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. So it's some sort of normalized power. They're claiming up to 67% better performance. And how are they measuring performance? Apparently they're using 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme graphics score. So in 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme graphics score, they can get up to 67% better power. Better performance at this power level right here. Now, at different power levels, you can see that these performance curves change. Notice that in this one, they are showing the AMD competition, which is interesting. So we do have AMD competition here, but again, normalized at certain power targets. What does this mean? Again, leaves a lot of room for independent third-party testing to validate these types of claims and what exactly they mean here. So anyway, interesting stuff. So basically they're talking about they will be promising a lot of driver updates on a regular basis. Looks like a pretty well-featured control panel, and talking a lot about compatibility that has been validated. So those compatibility is going to be the big question mark, right? How do games actually run on ARM on Windows? That's going to be a huge question mark to be addressed in further testing. Now, let's get on to some quicker news topics. One thing is we do have SIGGRAPH 2024 keynote presentations, and one of them is Jensen Huang. Now, you might hope that this would mean that we would see Nvidia's next gaming GPUs, because SIGGRAPH is talking about, graphics technology. However, if you actually read the notes for the session details, it sounds basically like what they talked about in, let's see if can I get the, well, whatever. The session details basically sound like what he already talked about at Computex, talking a lot about digital twins for, production and things like that. In other words, it sounds very AI focused, a lot like the Computex presentation. I'm hoping that as the date for this, being a little bit later into the year, it might be possible we would hear something about the next generation of graphics cards. But again, nothing in the presentation detail notes sound like they're anything beyond the AI-focused stuff that we saw at Computex. So anyway, we'll have to see what else we get out of that, but I'm not too hopeful about anything particularly interesting. Now, in some maybe bad news, it sounds like TSMC's 3nm supply runs short amid huge AI demand. Nvidia, Apple, AMD, Qualcomm consider raising chip prices. So here's the thing. Unfortunately, with all these big companies, especially when we're looking at graphics cards and gaming CPUs and all of that, if they're being manufactured by TSMC to get the actual silicon, well, if there's huge demands on that silicon for AI, and companies can sell that at massive profit margins given the demand, what does that mean for the pricing for consumers on other products if the same silicon can be sold for huge amounts of profits elsewhere? Anyway, so that's not great news. We'll have to see what comes of it in terms of pricing for things. In other possible pricing issues due to the surge in AI demand, memory is another place we could see that. So we're seeing headlines that memory markets to experience a supply shock as AI-driven demand comes in for the rescue. Now they're talking the rescue in terms of memory companies making lots more money. Now, why would they make lots more money? Because there's lots more demand, so you can sell for higher prices. Now, like the HBM memory and things like that in the highest end, AI platforms and things like that aren't necessarily direct competition for the consumer GPUs, but consumer GPUs, I think, could also end up getting kind of some issues with all of the supply pressure and things like that as well. So again, I'm not optimistic about pricing for what we see in next generations of products. So we'll have to see what actually happens. But these are kind of rumblings of bad news on the horizon for if you were hoping for really aggressive pricing on any consumer products that utilize memory or TSMC processes. Now, I want to report on this. This is kind of interesting. So I saw this videocards.com article talking about Colorful, not only with their MEOW series of graphics cards, but their interesting marketing move here to release a 4-minute long, animated video of these characters actually with a more coming soon. It's like a to be continued series. Now, my kids thought the cats were kind of cute. So there's that, but this is an interesting move in marketing. Now, the at least English version of the voicings on these cats certainly seem to be AI generated, and I wonder how much of this whole thing is AI generated. Because I'm curious if this amount of whatever budget was put into this. Now, it's obviously not super high budget, but there's a lot going on here. And this 4-minute long little animated show. Is that gonna really pay off for them? I don't know. But anyway, there's the MEOW series of graphics cards, and Colorful is taking a new marketing approach to all of that. Now, since we're talking about, graphics cards models and things like that, we do see XFX teasing replaceable fans, and we'll have to see, how that goes. It's kind of an interesting idea that you could swap out fans. from both the servicing the GPU if there's a problem with your fan side of things, but also maybe just for more customizability in the future, although I haven't seen much from them as far as buying individual separate fans to customize with. Also, more, I think, just kind of in the Chinese market right now, but Vast Armor, I think is how you would pronounce that, is Vast Armor, not Vastermore. Which is an, like I said, a Chinese region-focused company that seems to be a rather new AMD board partner, showing off a new white GPU with their Alloy series. Now they have I think their whole thing is they have the Super Alloy as their high-end, Alloy as their mid-range, and Starry Sky as their lower-range product tier. So anyway, interesting to see if anything will come of Vast Armor and if they'll expand out to other regions or anything like that. We see Asrock launching an 8GB version of the 6500 XT, which is interesting. Now, some other companies have already beaten them to market with 8GB versions of the 6500 XT. Now, 8GB certainly helps when you were spilling over the 4GB. However, it's still a very weak GPU overall. So kind of interesting to see a new version of it launching at this point in time. Anyway, and then moving on to more of the PC game side of things, we are getting an interesting leak from data mining from the Epic Games Store, which has leaked things like The Last of Us Part 2, which again is not officially announced for PC, although we've seen other leakers pointing to it actually already being done, but them just waiting to release it till there's the next season 2 of The Last of Us TV show, because then you would kind of build into some of that hype from the marketing. But this is further confirmation that the PC version is at least in the works. We're also seeing Final Fantasy IX Remake, which has been rumored being at least, again, this is confirmed in the sense that it's in the files for the Epic Games Store, which would sound like we'd be getting a PC version, and also some kind of new Turok game. So interesting, have to keep our eyes on those as things develop. Now, in terms of Epic Games Store, if you feel like games that end up being exclusive to that, by the way, no word on any of these being exclusive to the Epic Games Store, also no word that they wouldn't be. But in case you're like me and kind of forgot that Kingdom Hearts exists on PC now, because it was in kind of an Epic Games black hole, exclusivity black hole, it does look like they're now all out on Steam. So you could take a look at that if you've been interested in Kingdom Hearts. All right, hopefully you guys found today's news video useful and or interesting. Huge thank you to viewers, subscribers, commenters, and especially channel members. I did recently do a members exclusive video talking about kind of behind the scenes, what are my plans for the summer, especially regarding revisiting any GPUs in modern games and testing and things like that. Anyway, so huge thank you to the channel members who directly support the channel financially by clicking that join button. Again, you get some exclusive behind the scene videos, some early access to other videos, membership badges in the comment section. It's a lot easier. I can filter by member comments to see those comments a little bit more easier and reply to them more easily. All of that, so that's a great way to support the channel if you're interested, and I hope everybody has an excellent day.